Alrighty, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. We've got a lot of ground to cover today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lauren Sharp. I'm in business development here at Skyven Technologies and will be the host for today's webinar. Just want to thank everyone for joining us as we discuss the Inflation Reduction Act, keys to understanding the IRA's investment in industrial decarbonization. A couple of housekeeping items before I get us started. We will be recording today's webinar, and if you have any questions during the presentations, there's a Q&A chat function at the bottom of your control panel. Feel free to shoot a couple of questions in there, and we'll have a dedicated Q&A section at the very end. Just as a disclaimer here, Skyven Technologies is not speaking on behalf of the Department of Energy today. Everything discussed in today's webinar is our own opinions and understandings of the IRA. All right, and with that, next slide, Taylor. We have a great webinar for everyone today. We are lucky enough to have Blaine Collison from the Renewable Thermal Collaborative on. He'll be discussing his work at the RTC and just really why this is such an important opportunity for manufacturers in the US to pay attention to. We'll then follow it up with Skyven's very own founder and CEO, Arun Gupta, who will give us a brief overview of the IRA. What are the key pieces of information folks need to understand in order to secure this funding? We'll then have a section discussing working with Skyven, what's our technical offering that we are pursuing with this grant, and really what sets us up as a unique partner for this grant opportunity. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have a Q&A section at the very end. Hopefully everyone has questions. Next slide then, Taylor. All right, meeting the speakers. So as I mentioned, Arun Gupta is the founder and CEO of Skyven Technologies. For those that don't know, we're an energy as a service company founded focused on cutting CO2 emissions related to industrial process heat. And then we have Blaine Collison, who is the executive director of the Renewable Thermal Collaborative. He's also a senior vice president at David Gardner and Associates, which is a clean energy policy and consulting firm based out of Arlington, Virginia. Blaine, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Lauren, and thank you, Arun, both of you for having me today. Really appreciate the chance to chat a little bit with the group here. Again, I'm Blaine Collison, the executive director of the RTC. I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes sharing with folks what the RTC is and why this opportunity is so interesting. So I'm undoubtedly preaching a little bit to the choir on this, but industrial decarbonization is a critical priority here, right, for U.S. and frankly global decarbonization, right? I mean, the industrial sector is almost a quarter of U.S. emissions, and you know we haven't made a lot of progress there yet, which of course brings us to the meat of the discussion today, right? Because how do we make progress and how do we accelerate progress there? Next slide, please. So the RTC is a global buyer-led coalition focused around decarbonizing scope 1, right? Addressing thermal energy with renewables. We are particularly focused on industrial applications, though we are also engaged on buildings, right? So process heat, industrial process heat, and heating and cooling of buildings. And we've divided this is a big job, of course, right? And we've divided the work up into sort of three big areas: technology, market development issues, and policy. And underlying all of that, of course, is creating a community of practice here and a peer-to-peer learning network and collaboration forum. And we are organized around members, so large energy users, thermal energy users, and then sponsors, solutions providers, to dig into really quite a portfolio of work streams here. I should note that Skyven is, of course, one of our sponsors, and we appreciate their support of the RTC and their engagement in all the work. Tremendously helpful. Next slide, please. Just take a quick look at sort of who's in the RTC. And if folks have heard me on other calls, I have noted before that this slide keeps going out of date, and that's true again. We've added at least one new member whom we'll be announcing shortly. But if you look at this group, this is a really interesting collection of industrials and process requirements and operational footprints and impact, right? And these are the companies that are and institutions that are really digging in to try to figure out how do we decarbonize Scope 1? How do we deploy these technologies? How do we finance those? How do we make it happen and make it go faster? All of these companies have public climate or greenhouse gas targets. All of them are working to get to and scale implementation and deployment. Next slide, please. And then on the sponsor side, this is a similarly interesting and growing group of companies that includes technology providers and renewable energy advisors and third-party project financiers, technology developers across a whole range of technologies, utilities, others. It's an amazing collection of expertise, and frankly, looking at the whole RTC cohort, it's an amazing collection of an aggregation of footprint and impact and innovation and bringing solutions and business models to bear on this intractable, not an intractable problem, on this big challenging problem. So we really appreciate everyone's engagement and contributions to the work here. And this is really what we do, right? And I won't spend too much time here, but again, we are looking at this set of technologies, right, and trying to help our members understand how to think about these and how to sort of block them into their decarbonization plans. We're engaged on U.S. policy. We have an annual summit in DC. We'd love to see everybody there. Be in October. The greenhouse gas accounting work has been very active and top of mind lately. Doing some sector work, and also the renewable thermal vision. This is, if you go to the next slide. This is where I'll start to turn it over here. This graphic comes from our renewable thermal vision report, right, and helps to put some focus on this problem that Arun is gonna really dig into how we might address. This comes from a report that's available on the RTC website, Renewable Thermal Vision Report. This is U.S. industrial emissions by sector, some of the highest emitting sectors, and by temperature range, right? And what's really interesting here, in some ways, is so there are emissions all over the temperature requirements. 78% of U.S. industrial emissions are in the low and medium temperature ranges, right? Which suggests some interesting opportunities to focus and scale. And as we think about the resources being made available through the IRA, start to get a sense of where some of those opportunities might be. Again, that report's available for download on the RTC website. And I believe, Arun, that is my last slide. So thank you again for having me. This is where it starts to get very, very real, right? And we're just super excited to see Skyven digging into going after this opportunity at DOE and supporting companies in their efforts there.
Awesome. Thanks, Blaine. I appreciate it. Hey, everyone. My name is Arun Gupta, and I'm, as Lauren introduced me kindly, I'm the founder and CEO here at Skyven. I'm super excited to be talking to you today about what the Department of Energy is calling an unprecedented opportunity to lead the world in the next industrial revolution. And that next industrial revolution, of course, is industrial decarbonization. Next slide. So in order to catalyze industrial decarbonization, the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, has allocated $5.8 billion towards industrial decarbonization demonstration projects. This is a grant program that is unbelievably large. And so the Department of Energy intends to make grant awards where each individual award minimum size is $35 million, and then the maximum size per individual award is $500 million. And the Department of Energy is anticipating with that $5.8 billion budget, they'll be making 35 to 75 awards. So it's a good number of awards as well. And each award will have a minimum 50% cost share. That means the federal government will cover half the project cost. The other half of the cost needs to come from a non-federal source, which most likely is private funding. And we'll talk a little bit about how Skyven helps with that in a minute. The use of funds here is to fund large-scale, multi-site technology demonstration projects that reduce or eliminate greenhouse gas emissions. Now, I want to just take a minute here and say that what the Department of Energy means by technology demonstration projects, what they mean by that is not an early stage pilot. They're looking for technologies that have already been piloted and are ready for mass deployment, but have not yet achieved mass deployment. So we're in this stage between pilot, post-pilot, but before the technology might be considered an industry best practice. And that's where this funding plays. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. The last key thing to know here is the dates. This is a fast moving opportunity. The Department of Energy needs to get this money out the door. And they have timeline requirements by law by which they need to deploy this funding. And that results in a pretty tight timeline. The Department of Energy intends to select recipients of this funding by the end of calendar year 2023. And so working backwards, we at Skyven anticipate that grant proposals, the applications, will be due in the September timeframe. So that's not much time to put together an application. Go to the next slide. So the big question is, what technologies are going to qualify? So the technology, first and foremost, needs to significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the industrial sector. And Department of Energy wants to focus on hard to decarbonize industries. And let's be honest, when it comes to industrial manufacturing, the whole space is hard to decarbonize. And so I think the key thing to remember here is that, in order to qualify, you need to have an energy intensive industrial manufacturing facility. And so then the technology needs to increase the energy efficiency, which goes along with reducing emissions. And then, as I mentioned, the technology needs to be ready for multi-facility demonstrations. A big priority for this award is the Department of Energy wants to push technologies down the cost curve. So they want to capture a technology higher on the cost curve, and through this funding and essentially like this mass deployment, they want to drive it down the cost curve. So there needs to be enough volume in the projects proposed to actually drive it down the cost curve. I also want to say that there are a couple other things that the funding does fund as well that are outside of the scope of this presentation. And I'll give you some resources where you can look those up if those are of interest. So the grant priorities, we talked a little bit about, installing commercially ready technologies. Another big grant priority is benefiting the local community. So the grant really wants to see, how do local communities benefit? How are jobs created? And how is the local air quality improving? And there's also a focus on disadvantaged communities and making sure that that industry is decarbonized in a way that's equitable across the United States. We talked about multi-facility retrofits. Multi-facility is really a driver behind driving these technologies down the cost curve. And then we talked about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide. So the funding process here follows a fairly standard grant process. First, there'll be a concept paper that's due. And then, as I mentioned, we're expecting in September a full grant application will be due, and we're expecting award notifications by the end of the year. And then the Department of Energy has suggested that they'll be executing these awards in phases with go, no-go checkpoints between phases. So it's not like when you get the grant that the government just writes you a blank check and you just take the money. There'll be checkpoints along the execution process to make sure that the project is going well. So key dates, we're expecting, these are estimated dates because the Department of Energy hasn't released the precise dates yet. We're expecting concept papers to be due in the May timeframe, full applications due in September, and award notifications by the end of the year. The next slide. Here are just a few additional resources. The notice of intent, I've provided the number there, is the key document to read, because that gives you, it's like a 5-page synopsis of all the key information in the grant. Next slide. Okay, so that's about the grant. Now I'd like to tell you how Skyven can help you win some grant funding to decarbonize your facilities. Next slide. So few things about Skyven. We are built from the ground up to decarbonize industrial heat. That's our mission. And that includes deploying public funding to help achieve the mission. And so a few reasons to work with Skyven. The first is we've got the cutting edge technology that fits the DOE program priorities. Next slide. And next slide. And that's our steam generating heat pumps. So this is a technology that covers that 70 or so % of low and medium grade industrial heat that Blaine mentioned on his slide. And what it does is it takes cooling water at 80 or 90 degrees Fahrenheit, takes that heat, rather than rejecting it to atmosphere, it actually increases the temperature of that heat as high as 400 degrees Fahrenheit and generates steam that's injected directly into the plant's steam header. And so in doing so, this system operates outside of the plant's process. It just connects to the cooling return and the steam headers and is backed up by existing boilers and cooling towers, because we know from experience that that high reliability is mission critical in the industrial sector, and engineering for redundancy is a key care about. When compared with electric boilers, which is kind of what has been the default option for electrifying steam production today, the system uses roughly 60 to 70% less electricity than electric boilers. And it also threads that needle between the experimental and the best practice. It is an evolution of highly reliable mechanical vapor recompression technology, or MVR technology, which has been around for a couple decades and operates in very high reliability industrial environments today. And so that this technology adapts that MVR system to be able to generate high pressure, high temperature heat. So, the question, how do Skyven steam generating heat pumps address the grant priorities? Well, these heat pumps have the potential to reduce CO2 emissions from steam and boilers. 70% is kind of like a number that you can keep in your head. It's really 70% up to 100%. It could, in some cases, completely eliminate the need for boilers. And in doing so, reduces air pollution in local communities, because you don't have these smokestacks in the middle of communities where people live, producing emissions. Of course, it does increase energy efficiency, upgrades low temperature waste heat, far more efficient than standard electric boilers. And as we talked about, it's ready for multi-facility demonstrations. This system has been demonstrated in a full-scale industrial facility, actually a small handful of them in the ethanol industry. and are really ready to be driven down the cost curve, which is the whole point of this funding. Next slide. So next reason to work with us is grant and funding expertise. Go to the next slide. And the next one. So we, as I mentioned, the company was built from the ground up to help manufacturers reduce and eliminate their CO2 emissions, which includes deploying public funding to achieve that mission. So in 2018, the state of California released a total of about $120 million to fund decarbonization of California's food production industry. And Skyven single-handedly was able to win $20 million of that 120, supporting 9 projects across 4 different customers. And then in addition to that, just a couple of weeks ago, we were just notified that we've won a new $2.8 million award to accelerate heat pump manufacturing and production, and also support the deployment of the technology. In addition to that, we have a strong relationship with the Department of Energy. We are an official Department of Energy financial ally. We are already working with a couple large multinational partners on this opportunity. And we've got a bunch more partnerships in progress on this. And as part of our standard process, we consider the community, and we'll actually actively engage with the community, and that can be community groups, could be the mayor's office, and get their input on the project design and execution. And that's the type of thing the Department of Energy is looking for. So the third here is an aligned financial model. Go to the next slide, next one. So the grant writing, the grant execution, the project execution, engineering, construction, commissioning, we handle all of it, and we handle it at our own cost. Go to the next slide. So this is important because you may remember there's a 50% cost share on the grant. So the IRA, right, the grant opportunity will cover 50% of the project costs, but you still got the other half of the costs that someone needs to cover. So Skyven steps in and offers that remaining half of the project cost through our energy as a service business model. So I'll take just a couple minutes to talk about that briefly. Next slide. So we're an energy as a service provider, and so we deliver clean process heat to industrial facilities at prices lower than natural gas. And in order to do that, we deploy technologies like the steam generating heat pump on site at industrial facilities. So we pay for the whole thing, and then we apply for and win grant and incentive funding. And in this case, we're talking specifically about this IRA opportunity, and apply that funding, as well as we bring in additional private funding to cover the entire cost of the project. And then we measure how much steam that heat pump is actually delivering to the facility, and we bill based on the pounds of steam delivered. And so if the system's not working, you don't pay. Our customers don't pay, right? They're only paying for actual steam delivered. And if you remember, the system is designed with redundancy from the existing boilers and the existing cooling towers. And so it's a way that we've developed to really minimize risk for our customers. Only pay for actual performance. And if it's not working, you've got your existing stuff in there to make sure that the plant doesn't experience any sort of downtime or service interruption. Go to the next slide. So, this business model, the reason why we came up with this is because it aligns our financial goals with our customers' emissions reductions. We want to make sure that we are rewarded for achieving our mission. And our mission is not to sell equipment or to do anything but actually reduce emissions. And so that's what we get paid for. And if it's not working, then we don't get paid. And that's by design. We're really trying to take on the risk of achieving our mission. And part of that means that we put our money on the line to ensure success. And that's why we fund the projects or fund the cost share piece of the project. You go to the next slide. So last reason to work with Skyven is end-to-end project execution. So we take full responsibility of projects from initial concept all the way through operations and maintenance, including all of the funding, including the grant writing, including the grant negotiations, the management, the monthly check-ins with the Department of Energy, everything. We handle all of it on behalf of our customers, and we do all of that at our own cost. And the only billing that we pass through to our customers is per pound of steam. So the process to do that starts with initially signing a non-binding letter of intent, which simply says we want to, we're interested in this grant opportunity. And then after that, we run through a software modeling tool called Galileo in order to do essentially a facility level analysis and make sure that all the technical conditions are right and the project is indeed technically feasible and makes sense. And then we sign a term sheet, and then the term sheet kind of outlines the terms of our Thermal Energy Services Agreement, or TESA, T-E-S-A. And then after that, with the term sheet, we'll start doing actual engineering, where we'll come on site for what we call a project discovery. We'll put meters on things and start taking measurements. And we do all that again at our own cost while we're negotiating the full Thermal Energy Services Agreement. And then once that agreement is signed, we go through a stage gate execution process, which includes equipment procurement, construction, and commissioning. We do that, again, the interface with the Department of Energy and the check-ins and the milestones, we handle all of that on behalf of our customers. And we really work in partnership with our customers for the actual execution process. We like to consider ourselves an extension of our customers' capital projects team when it comes to execution. And then from a maintenance standpoint, we stick around for at least a decade to maintain the project, because you can build a great project, but if it doesn't stay running, it's not achieving the benefit. So we keep the projects running. And again, all of this is at our own cost. The only thing that we're passing through our customers is the price per pound of steam delivered. Next slide. So question, how to begin an industrial partnership with Skyven. And that is, the first step is schedule a call. We got a great team here at Skyven. We'd love to get to know you. We'd love to tell you more about what we do, and we'd love to learn about your operations and explore how the technology can fit and how this federal funding can help you achieve your carbon goals. And then next step, as I mentioned, is a non-binding letter of intent, and then we can kind of go from there in terms of project planning. I mentioned that the grant here is on a tight timeline, and so that puts a tight timeline on working with us. So the deadline for the non-binding letter of intent is May 15th. We need to move quickly on that. So I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for questions. So I'll just leave you with some key takeaways. We got $5.8 billion from the IRA, $35 to $500 million per award, and that chunk of money is well suited to fund multi-site projects. across multiple companies, multiple industries. And there's a 50% cost share. And so Skyven's putting together a portfolio of projects where we'll cover the cost share, we'll cover all the grant management, we'll write a big grant to cover essentially cover all of the projects in our portfolio. And so we're essentially inviting you to join us here and become part of, again, what the Department of Energy is calling the opportunity for the next industrial revolution. Okay, I think time for questions.
Awesome, thanks guys. Yeah, we've had a couple come in through the Q&A chat. First one here is directed towards you, Arun. Are Skyven's heat pumps only available under the energy as a service model, or can clients purchase or finance the heat pumps themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have flexibility there. Given that the technology is newer, that's a reason why we like the energy as a service model, because it puts more of the risk on us. And we think we don't think that manufacturers should take risk on clean energy technology, because we need you to manufacture the thing that you're good at manufacturing. But if it really makes more sense for any particular client to purchase the equipment themselves, we are open to that.
Wonderful, thanks, Arun. This next question is directed towards you, Blaine. Third-party financing was critical to helping accelerate renewable electricity. How about renewable thermal?
Yeah, how about renewable thermal? Yes, is right. I mean, that's the short answer. As far as I'm aware, none of the companies faced with ambitious net zero or decarbonization targets are overburdened by CapEx reserves, right? And if they do have CapEx, there are often competing demands for those, and more compelling, higher priority places for those very limited resources to be allocated. In the renewable electricity experience, and I spent 15 years doing work there. Third-party capital was transformative, right? As an enabling mechanism, as an acceleration mechanism, and frankly, as a risk management and risk structuring mechanism. And I mean, we're starting to see that here in the thermal space with Skyven and some others. I can't imagine how we get to net zero by 2050 without this model, right? I think this is the massive scaling enabler.
We couldn't agree more here at Skyven. Got a follow-up question on that. Will the energy service model be considered a capital lease? Arun, maybe you can take that one.
Yeah, that's a great question. So in general, energy as a service, as a broad topic, can be structured in many different ways. Here at Skyven, we've structured our agreements from the ground up to be compatible with off-balance sheet financing. So they're service contracts, they're not leases, and they're not loans. That's intentional. But we have some flexibility here at Skyven, and so we can structure things differently, and it kind of depends on the particular goals, financial goals of our clients, finance and legal departments.
Partner. Thanks, Arun. We've got a two-part question here. So I'll ask the first part first. Is there the potential for is there the potential to partner with Skyven on an energy as a service funding application on a technology outside of what was presented today?
The short answer is yes, absolutely. Our mission is to decarbonize industrial heat. So we're not trying to push a particular technology. We just think that steam generating heat pumps are a great technology to accomplish our mission. They are not the only technology. It's been said many times before. It was said in the RTC Summit this fall. There is no silver bullet in the industrial sector. And while we think the steam generating heat pumps are as close as you're going to get, they are not actually a silver bullet. There are lots of other technologies that will be part of the solution, and we'd love to work with clients and with partners on deploying other technologies on the as a service business model.
Wonderful, thanks, Arun. Second part of this question. If we wanted to partner with Skyven on the energy as a service funding for an international site that would be ineligible for the DOE IRA funding, do you think that Skyven has the bandwidth, or is this opportunity so great it's going to take up most of our resources?
Great question. I appreciate that one. So as things stand today, we at Skyven are focused on the North American market. Just again, due to bandwidth limitations, we do have ambitions to scale internationally, but we're not ready to do that today. If you're a multinational with US-based facilities and facilities outside the US, we'd love to start by looking at your US facilities. Even if the energy prices aren't as high as they are in Europe, let's start here in the US, because that's kind of where we're based, and then we'll scale over to your international facilities.
Perfect, thank you. Question on installations. Are there any of these steam generating heat pumps up and running? And if so, can we visit them?
Oh, another good one. Lots of good questions. There are these steam generating heat pumps are up and running in a small handful of full-scale industrial facilities. They can be visited. For example, there's one running in Hungary at a large ethanol plant called Pannonia Bio. Visiting them from a practical standpoint, it's just a matter of of scheduling that and getting people's time, which is certainly possible. So yeah, they're running and they are visitable.
Right on. Great question that just came in. Can these types of projects take advantage of the 48C tax credits?
48C tax credits. That is a fantastic question. So the cost share aspect of this IRA funding opportunity requires non-federal funds. And so while I would say probably a deep, like that, a sharper answer to that question would require a little more digging. My kind of like initial opinion as someone that, spends a lot of time looking at this type of stuff, is that they're looking for non-federal funding to cover that other 50%, and a tax credit would be considered federal funding.
Wonderful. A question on the process. So what happens after a customer signs the letter of intent? What do we need to do to apply to the grant with Skyven? What's the next steps?
So next step after that letter of intent is to do a Galileo run. The Galileo, again, is the software that we've developed here at Skyven to rapidly analyze the facility. And it's essentially a software that's doing higher level feasibility analysis in a rapid automated way. The goal is to save save our clients time and save us time as well. And just make sure that that it's worth digging into more engineering detail. Like no one wants to go down the engineering rabbit hole if it wasn't there to start with. So that's the next step. Next step is run Galileo, and then the step after that would be for us to start. We have what we call a term sheet or memorandum of understanding, and that is an agreement. It's sort of a really lightweight agreement for Skyven to start real engineering and putting real engineering hours in. So that's what happens after that. If you sign the letter of intent, though, we're good on the grant. Skyven is going to be writing this grant, and it's just really a question of who's partnering with us to be part of that grant. So whose names are we putting on it other than ours? So if you put the letter of intent in, letter of intent is basically like reserving your spot on the grant. That's a good way to think about it.
Wonderful, thank you. Blaine, this next one is for you. What are RTC members thinking about in terms of this grant opportunity?
Huh. Well, as we've noted a couple of times, this is a huge slug of support, right, from the Department of Energy. We haven't seen support at these levels in ever, right? And it's a portfolio-oriented approach. I mean, Arun, I think you described that really well, right? And if I recall it, we had folks from OSED at the RTC summit last fall, and I think I'm restating this correctly, that what OSED really wants to do is help make projects 1 through 5 go for industrials, so that the industrials can then make projects 6 through 50 go all on their own, right? This is about enabling more downstream progress. That's pretty appealing, right? I mean, RTC members, they've all got dozens of sites, hundreds of sites in some cases, big goals, big areas under the curve to decarbonize. So in fact, we spent some time on an RTC call earlier today, in fact, talking about the OSED opportunity and the timeline. And this is a fantastic. We were talking about sort of at a higher structural level, and this is a really good deep dive into, okay, here are the mechanics. Here's how we make this real, and companies, here's a pathway to getting after this. So, I mean, Lauren, I'm now taking a long way. Let me find my way back to your question. I think that the membership of the RTC is very interested in this set of opportunities. We haven't seen this before. It's a potentially huge jumpstart for all their efforts.
Yeah, you gave me goosebumps there, Blaine, with that answer. This is, it's hard to imagine how this can transform the industrial sector. Arun, we had a question come in that's directed at you. As Skyven is aggregating several projects into a single application, are there companies with a single facility able to participate?
They are. Yeah, as long as the facility has the scale and the thermal intensity that meets the grant priority. So the grant is trying to decarbonize, essentially carbon intensive or combustion intensive manufacturing facilities. And so, if it's a large facility that happens to be owned by a company that only has one facility, that's okay.
Wonderful, thanks for that. Another question specifically for you, Arun. How long does it take to run Galileo? How long does that deeper next engineering phase take as well?
Great. That's a great question. So Galileo takes just a couple hours of time from someone who's knowledgeable at the plant. Galileo is a plant level analysis. And so we would do that at every facility that's being considered for the heat pump. And it takes about 2 hours per facility from someone who knows about the facility. And they're just answering questions like, how many boilers do you have and how big are the boilers? And then the software is doing a lot of the complex analysis in the back end automatically. And then the next phase in engineering, where we actually go on site and start measuring things, that typically takes about a month. That's what we call project discovery. And that's about as far as we're willing to go without a full agreement signed. But even after we sign the full agreement, nothing gets built on site until all the engineering questions that need to be answered are answered. And Skyven will pay for all of that engineering and will not pass a dime of it on to the customer, as long as, if we're successful at designing and developing and producing a design that meets our client's requirements, that they actually agree to build the project. And that's what our agreement says, is like, hey, if Skyven, you design a good project, then we'll build it. But only if you design a project that we sign off on.
Thanks for that, Arun. I think that we are at time. We do have one more question. Maybe you can answer it really, really fast, Arun. If I'm part of the grant that is awarded, how long until I see actual greenhouse gas benefits and savings? If you can answer it super fast.
Okay. If the grant is awarded, we're talking probably a year worth of equipment procurement time and then some months of construction. So you're probably looking at probably 2 years out from actually seeing a commissioned project that is driving greenhouse gas emissions. But as soon as the project is commissioned, I would expect you to see immediate greenhouse gas emissions reductions.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Arun. Well, everyone, we really appreciate your time and sticking with us. If you have any questions, we'd love to chat more about this grant opportunity and Skyven's plan of attack for it. Arun and my contact information is at the bottom of this presentation. Again, we'll send out slides to everyone after the fact, but appreciate everyone sticking around and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you all so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. Bye all.